Hello everyone, bringing you a video today looking at these, not the respirator, not the contents, just the haversacks. I've amassed quite a collection of these now, not only British, and I thought it would be worth going through and having a look at some of the differences between them. This isn't comprehensive, it's not going to be comprehensive. I don't have every pattern, every variation ever made, but I do have quite a good collection and I thought it would be interesting to take a look at them. So without further ado, we'll get the blanket down on the floor and have a look at these in comparison to one another.
So here we have what to many will be a fairly typical example of a light anti-gas respirator haversack. A little bit of history behind this. Of course, it's a major departure from the general service respirator haversacks which had gone before, which were primarily designed to be worn on the chest unless you were using a long hose respirator with them. This, of course, is primarily designed to be worn on the hip, or it can also be worn on the belt. They were sometimes worn on the chest as well, but they were designed to be worn in a much less awkward position in terms of lying prone and shooting and so forth, very much more out of the way around on the belt or on the shoulder strap, down on the hip. And they are made to be small, compact. The light anti-gas respirator itself, of course, was designed to be more compact and lightweight, and the haversack itself is very compact as well. It's made very much to be just big enough to contain the respirator and the goggles and the eye shields rather, and the various other accessories which were provided with each respirator. This is a Mark I example, and it differs from the Mark II primarily in the design of the quick release tab here. This is manufactured just from folded and stitched canvas, the same canvas that the haversack itself is made from. And if we look at this, one of the problems with this can be seen. It's begun to tear and wear through. And I would imagine that the the lack of durability in this was the reason it was changed in the Mark II, which we'll look at in just a minute. But this is the clearest sort of visual identifier of a Mark I haversack if you're looking for one. It also, the brass ring on here, the brass edging on here, and the metal loop that the quick release tab fits through are both smaller as well. The quick release tab will be made slightly bigger on the Mark II, as well as being made of sturdier materials. Other than that, it's essentially a standard light anti-gas respirator haversack. This being a British manufactured example, of course, important to stress that, because we will be looking at two examples which are manufactured in other countries as well. This is a British Mark I, as I say, and where the story really starts. We'll have a look inside now, and we can look at the various compartments and what was carried in them. So the main compartment here, of course, is primarily designed to take the facepiece and the filter. Forehead in first, filter tucked into the respirator, and it will slot in quite nicely. If we bring this up to the camera here, have a look inside, you can see at the bottom there's a little white tab at the back. I'm not sure if I can hold this up with one hand. Little white tab at the back there, which if I put my hand in doesn't remain clear in camera. But this component there, that component there with the press stud, it's a piece of white tape with a press stud on it. That basically allows you to secure the shoulder strap when it's removed from the haversack. You can tuck it in the back there. And the other piece of cloth you can see there with the press stud attached is actually a little pocket which takes the anti-dimming compound in its tin. And then at the back here we also have a compartment which will take the eye shields. So this is basically they take up the whole of that compartment at the back there, and the respirator haversack is just tall enough to take a wallet containing eye shields. Looking at the outside, we have the stowage for the anti-gas ointment. You can actually see here where a tin has left a mark in this pocket here. You'd have not only the anti-gas ointment, but you also have the cotton waste for removing blister agent from the skin, and then obviously the ointment can be applied after that. And we have another pocket on the other side which allows that to be carried. You can see the shoulder strap design here, very simple. These rings here stitched on with this webbing, which is stitched underneath the pocket. The pocket's then stitched on top, and the shoulder straps, of course, are easily removable by unfastening the strap from these little buckles. Let's tuck it underneath there if we can. There we go. And then the shoulder strap just pulls out of there, and to put them on and to adjust is just as easy. And obviously you can move these up and down the strap and adjust the length as well to suit your needs. So very, very simple way of attaching the shoulder strap there. And this is made of a lightweight webbing material. We look at the back here. As I already said, the haversack can be carried on the belt, and we have hooks there to make it compatible with the 1937 pattern equipment. Some examples of these have D-rings on each side, which allows a piece of whipcord to be attached around the body to stabilise the haversack, whether it's worn at the hip or on the chest. But they're not present on every example, and I'm not entirely sure why this is. At this stage, I think it's safest to say it's just a manufacturing variation, but there may be some logic to which haversacks were fitted with it and which weren't. It's not a necessary feature, particularly when this is worn on the belt. Obviously, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to flop around when it's worn on the belt. But when worn at the hip, also the shoulder strap is to be passed underneath the belt of the 1937 pattern equipment, which again stops it flopping around and moving around too much, keeps it quite stable on the hip, which is the idea of having something passing around the waist, of course, to stop this flopping around. But that is the Mark 1 light anti-gas respirator haversack. As I say, the British made example, and this is where the story really starts, is with this example of the light anti-gas respirator haversacks. Okay, here by way of direct contrast, we have a Mark II next to the Mark 1, and you can see immediately the difference in the quick release tab. This is a much sturdier design and obviously far more serviceable from that point of view. We'll just move this out of the way now, and we can have a look at the Mark II on its own. The design is otherwise pretty much exactly the same. If we open up the quick release tab here, you can see what I mean, that these components here are a bit wider to allow that to function. This is dated, again, this is, here we go, March 43, so it's the same month and same year as the Mark 1 we've just looked at. If we bring this up to the camera here, you can see the components in there are exactly the same. We have removed the whipcord from this one. You can see the little pouch in here, which is actually open, and the tab at the back there, which will take the strap from the shoulder strap when it's not being employed to carry the haversack. We have the external pouches here, as you can see, external pockets to take the anti-gas ointment, both sides. And this one, as you can see, we still have the C-hooks on the back as well. This one has the little D-rings and the length of whipcord to allow it to be secured around the body. And you can see there, Mark 1s often have this as well, and Mark 2s are made with and without them. So as I say, I'm not entirely sure what the logic is behind that, but it is just something to note. It's a feature of the designs is that not all of them have this, and some do. So that is a Mark II light anti-gas respirator haversack, and these would be manufactured in this form and this colour of materials right the way through into the 1950s. I can just get that closed there. Into the early 1950s, there are early 1950s examples of this out there, and there are various variations on this theme as well. Most notably in the form of the quick release tab. So sometimes they have a brass rather than a sherrodized steel tip on the end. Some of them have no tip on the end, it's just a piece of webbing. It doesn't seem to alter the mark designation at all. It's just, again, a manufacturing variation. So as I say, this video isn't comprehensive because there are various versions of this out there, all wartime dated, that have different designs of quick release tab on them. And some post-war, as I say, there are 50s examples which are exactly the same as this, in the same sort of light green canvas with tan webbing fittings. But we'll have a look now at a slightly different version, again a wartime example, but a slightly modified design in terms of materials. Okay, the example we have here is made entirely in jungle green webbing and canvas. There's some debate about these. People often associate them with the late war jungle equipment, the 1944 pattern web equipment from that set of equipment. But they do predate that. If we have a look under the flap here, you can see the stamping here is in red to make it visible. This is again 343, so March 1943. But a new equipment set for use in the jungle had been debated for some time prior to the introduction of 1944 pattern. So it's not surprising really that a jungle green version of the light anti-gas respirator haversack was produced towards that end. The actual history, the reasoning behind this manufacture and so forth, I'm not entirely sure on, although obviously it appears that it is made for use in jungle environments, and it's made in this colour scheme for that purpose. But as I say, the development of jungle kit predated the experiments with jungle kit and so forth predated the introduction of 1944 patents. The fact that these are dated prior to the introduction of that equipment set should not be too surprising. Otherwise, the design is essentially exactly the same. Which we'll just open this up again. You can have a look inside there. You can see again we have the pocket there for the anti-dimming outfit, and at the back we do have the white tab there to take the shoulder strap. If I just straighten that out a little bit, you might be able to see a bit more clearly there. You can see that at the back there now, and again we have the whipcord in there. Externally, again, exactly the same, just made in the different coloured materials. We have the, buckle that up again, get the camera to focus here, if it will, there we go. Two side pockets, as you can see. The shoulder strap is attached and functions in exactly the same way with the two little buckles there. You can see I have this one tightened down to its shortest extent. This could then be worn around the neck and with the haversack worn on the chest at the alert. If we look at the back here, this example does have D-rings, as you can see there. And this one again has C-hooks, although in this instance we actually have steel, Sherardise steel hooks to attach it to the back of the belt. But as I say, just a variation on the theme, a jungle green example. Not actually seen any photographs of these in use, and they do turn up in pretty much mint condition, so I'm not entirely sure that they ever were issued out. Obviously, respirators by the Middle War period were not being carried in the Far East, although it would have been interesting to see if these were issued out had the war continued out there, and fears been raised over the Japanese using chemical weapons in a last-ditch effort. But that's very much a what-if. But that's the jungle green version of the light anti-gas respirator haversack. One version of the haversack which is sometimes confused with the jungle green example is this post-war late 50s example, which is made all in green webbing, but as you can see, it's not as dark. It's not this dark jungle green. It's just all the components on the haversack are made in green, including the webbing. But this is not jungle green. This is a standard issue 1950s example, and these are seen in use. You certainly see photographs of these in 1969 in Operation Banner, as well as earlier examples with the tan webbing still in use as well. As I say, they were made into the early 50s, and at some point in the 50s it seems manufacture was changed to all the webbing being made in green. We'll have a look at this in a little bit more detail now. We'll just remove the jungle green example, and as I say, this is a 50s dated, late 50s dated example. I think this is 58 if I remember correctly, or 57. Let's have a look in here. 1957. You can just see at the bottom there, you can see the 7 there. L&S Limited Light Mark II, so it's still a Mark II haversack, just made in slightly different materials. The internal fittings again are exactly the same. If we look here, in fact, just fix that to the press stud there, makes it a little bit easier to see. I can find the male part of the press stud. Where's it gone? There it is. There we go. If I bring this up to the camera here, again, hopefully we'll get some light in there. At the back there is now a green tab. If I can hold my finger in there and show you it clearly. Let's have a look here. You see the little tab at the back there is now made in green rather than in white, and we still have the little pouch there for the anti-dimming compound. In fact, you can see better there now I've pulled it round. So the internal fittings still all there, still have the compartment to the back for the eye shields, and the external fittings, the external components are exactly the same as well. One thing that this has actually had is a little eyelet let into the side here. Now I think this is actually post-manufacturing modification. Of course, the anti-dimming compound, the Mark 6, has a little loop so you can fit it with a lanyard so it doesn't fall out of the haversack, and I can only imagine that that's for this. That would seem to make the most sense. Possibly also a place to attach an ID disc, I don't know, but that would make most sense to me, would be the idea that it would be for a little lanyard to attach to the anti-dimming outfit. Externally we have the two pockets, as you can see here, one on each side for the anti-dimming, for the anti-gas ointment, but also laterally used to carry MBC kits, the decontamination kits, and certainly in the manual of the mid-1960s manual on this, the light anti-gas respirator haversack is expected to carry the DKP1 and the DKP2. I don't believe they're referred to as that at this point, but they are the decontamination pads and the Fuller's Earth, which is a bit of a tight squeeze to get into these, but it's mentioned in the manual. And on the back, as you can see, all the fittings have now returned to brass. We again have the belt attachment here with the C-hooks, and the two D-rings are present on this example as well, as you can see. You can see again the only steel fittings, in fact, are the little buckles on the shoulder strap, which are Sherardise steel as standard. And you can see again it's this lighter green colour, not the dark jungle green, but all the webbing components now made in green rather than in tan. But that, as I say, is a late 50s example of the light anti-gas respirator haversack, a British made example of the light anti-gas respirator haversack. The first example we're going to look at, which is not British made, is this, which is an Australian made example. And of course, Australia also made their own version of the light anti-gas respirator in camouflage finish, which is quite a distinctive thing and quite rare. The design differs mainly in having a lifter dot fastener at the top here rather than the quick release tab, but internally is very, very similar. You can see here, still referred to as a light Mark II, MH&Co, 1943 Light 2. As you can see, typical Australian stamps in purple. For some reason they stamp most of their kit in purple ink. You can see a compartment at the back here again for the eye shields. And then internally we have the same sort of fittings, if we can get enough light in there to see. You've got a little pocket in there for the anti-dimming outfit again, and the little strap at the back to take the shoulder strap when it is detached. The external carriage is the same. We have the pocket on each side, as you can see. Spin it around. But the way the shoulder strap is attached is very different. Now what you have here, rather than having a loop on each side ring, a metal ring, you have a buckle, a 1937 pattern type of buckle, or British type of buckle anyway, also used on 08 and other equipment sets. And you can see that's just on a little webbing end here. And then the strap just has a thick section at the end here, which will pass through and lock in position on that buckle. Now, the rest of the strap is the same sort of width and thickness as the examples on British light anti-gas respirator haversacks. So if you try and shorten this strap off, it just slides through. So the only part of the strap you can actually attach through this buckle is the double thickness section at the end, which means you can't shorten this off to wear it around the neck and carry the respirator haversack on the chest, which obviously is a difference, quite a major difference, and you just not a feature I presume that the Australians thought was necessary. A very different way of doing it compared to the British example. You can also see this is in sort of these various different tones of material. We've got the two different colours of canvas, and then it's quite lurid green, sort of mint green for the carry strap, which is interesting, I suppose. And on the back, we don't have any D-rings, but we do have the two belt hooks to carry it on the equipment belt. Again, these are Sheridized steel, as you can see. So some features very different and some features the same from British manufacture. Clearly designed to do exactly the same job, but do it slightly differently. Certainly in terms of the shoulder strap, you can't wear this on, you can't shorten that down and wear this on the chest as you can with British made examples. So that's an Australian light anti-gas respirator haversack. Okay, so the final light anti-gas respirator we're going to have a look at is this example here, and this is Canadian post-war example. Of course, during the war, Canada would use British-made examples, and indeed in the early post-war years as well. But alongside the 1951 pattern web equipment, this would be introduced. This is designed to still take the British light anti-gas respirator. It's just a Canadian-made example, and it's very similar to British practice. We have the pull tab at the top here, slightly different in terms of, obviously we have a very large strengthening metal collar around there through the webbing, but otherwise very, very similar. Internally, we still have the same features. You can see there a little pocket at the bottom there to take the anti-dimming outfit, and then you have the loop at the back to take the shoulder strap when it's detached, and a compartment there for eye shields. Fasten that up again. The pull tab is quite, I have to say, this is made of very soft canvas, and the pull tab is quite, on the quick release, is quite flimsy, and often doesn't want to go through. There we go. That's it. It's a little bit fiddly there. As I say, this is quite thin, quite flimsy, but other than that, it does serve its function. We have the pockets on each side here, obviously to take the anti-gas ointment, as you can see. Very small rings here to take the shoulder strap, but functioned and attached basically in exactly the same way as British practice, and the shoulder strap adjusts in the same way. So this is very much more a close copy of British practice than the Australian example. Looking at the back here, again, you have hooks to attach this onto the belt, and you have these two little D-rings. There's no whipcord with this, but you do have D-rings attached to this to allow that whipcord to be passed around the body to stabilise the haversack. So, as I say, this is a post-war Canadian example. Just double check here. I don't think any stamps are visible in the lid. They aren't, unfortunately, but never mind. But as I say, a post-war Canadian development of the design, or a copy of the design, I suppose. To be used with the 1951 pattern, up to the point when a new respirator haversack would be introduced later on, and obviously the C3 respirator alongside that. So that is a look at a selection of light anti-gas respirator haversacks. And here we can see the haversacks laid out alongside one another, just to give a clear contrast between the different takes on this design.
So there we are. That was a look at my collection of light anti-gas respirator haversacks. slightly strange topic for a video perhaps, but I hope you found it interesting nonetheless. As I say, I just thought it might be interesting to look through the variations in them, and obviously the developments that were made in countries other than the UK. It's quite interesting to see Commonwealth derivatives of British kit. So there it is. I do hope you found that interesting, as I always say. If you have, and you haven't already done so, I'd really appreciate you subscribing to the channel if you'd like to see more of this sort of thing. And whether you've subscribed already or you're newly subscribing, make sure you've hit the little bell, the little notification button, which is next to the subscribe button, which obviously will alert you when I upload future videos. There's also a Facebook and an Instagram page, which are both linked in the description. Good places to keep up with what's going on the channel. I also post up sneak peeks of videos there and photos from reenacting events and so forth. So good place to keep up with what's going on. But that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So until next time, bye for now.